All right, so get this Bitcoin.
Oh, yeah.
Is it about to crash and burn? Or is it on the verge of something even bigger?
That's the question everybody wants to know.
That's what we're diving into today.
Especially with how much buzz there is around Bitcoin these days.
Absolutely. And we've got this article from the Motley Fool that's got me thinking.
Oh, yeah.
They're analyzing Bitcoin's past performance, particularly around this thing called the halving event.
Right.
Which is basically this pattern in Bitcoin that's been surprisingly consistent over time. But could 2025 be the year that it throws as a curveball?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's make sure we're all on the same page about what Bitcoin is and why this whole halving event even matters.
You're right. Let's back up a bit.
Yeah?
Some of our listeners might be thinking, hold on, what even is Bitcoin?
So, in a nutshell, Bitcoin is a digital currency.
Okay.
But it's not like the dollars or euros you're used to.
Right.
It has a market cap of almost $1.9 trillion.
Trillion with a T.
That's trillion with a T.
Wow.
And each Bitcoin is currently worth around $100,000.
Which is pretty wild when you think about how much the price has fluctuated over the years.
Exactly. And that volatility fuels some pretty intense debate. You've got people on one side saying Bitcoin is a bubble ready to burst, while others believe it's the future of finance.
It's like a financial roller coaster, and everyone's trying to guess where it's going next.
Yeah.
Some people, like Michael Saylor, the MicroStrategy guy, he's predicting Bitcoin will hit $13 million per coin by 2045.
Wow, now that's an optimistic prediction.
Yeah.
But that's why understanding patterns like this halving event is so important. It helps us cut through the noise and analyze the potential trajectory of Bitcoin without getting swept up in the hype.
Okay, so let's break down this halving event for those of us who haven't been following Bitcoin since the beginning. How does it actually work?
Think of it like this Bitcoin mining is how new Bitcoins are created and released into the world. It involves powerful computers solving incredibly complex math problems to verify and add transactions to the blockchain.
The blockchain, that's like the digital ledger for all Bitcoin transactions, right?
Exactly. It's a public record of every single Bitcoin transaction that's ever happened. And the miners are the ones who maintain this ledger by solving those complex math problems. And for their effort, they get rewarded with, you guessed it, Bitcoin.
So it's like they're getting paid in Bitcoin for keeping the system running smoothly.
Precisely. But here's the kicker. Approximately every 4 years, the reward for mining Bitcoin gets cut in half.
Okay.
That's the halving event. It's built into Bitcoin's code, so it happens automatically.
And this halving event, according to the Motley Fool article, has a big impact on Bitcoin's price.
They've put together a table that shows Bitcoin's returns in the years surrounding each halving event. They looked at 2 years before the halving, 1 year before the year of the halving itself, and 1 year after.
And what they found is there's a pretty clear pattern of major price increases both before and after the halving. Like in 2016, the year of a halving event, Bitcoin gained a whopping 124%.
Yeah.
And the year after, it surged by an incredible 1,369%.
Wow.
So does that mean 2025 is going to be another boom year for Bitcoin?
Well, the most recent halving event just happened in 2024, and Bitcoin already hit all-time highs this year.
That's interesting because it makes you wonder if we're already seeing the effects of a halving play out.
Yeah.
Or if there's even more room for growth based on this pattern.
That's the big question. It's like trying to predict the next move in a game of chess.
Yeah.
But we have to remember, historical patterns are fascinating, but they don't guarantee the future. There's always the chance something unprecedented could come along and disrupt the trend.
That's true. We can't just assume the past will perfectly predict the future, especially with something as unpredictable as Bitcoin.
Exactly. That's what makes this so interesting. We know the halving event affects the supply of Bitcoin, creating this predictable pattern. But the demand for Bitcoin, that's a whole different ballgame.
Because demand is driven by so many factors, right? Things like overall market trends, investor sentiment, and even whether businesses and governments decide to adopt Bitcoin.
You got it. And these factors are much harder to predict than a pre-programmed halving event. So even if history suggests a certain trend, there's no guarantee that demand will follow suit and drive prices up in 2025.
So you're saying this time really could be different?
It's definitely a possibility. Think about it. The 2024 U.S. presidential election, the winning candidate ran on a pro-Bitcoin platform, something we've never seen before.
Yeah, that was huge news in the crypto world.
Exactly. It generated a lot of excitement and speculation around Bitcoin, but the long-term consequences are still a mystery.
Right.
Will it lead to wider adoption or will it fizzle out? We just don't know yet.
So it's a bit of a wild card, and another example of how unexpected events can impact Bitcoin's trajectory. But getting back to the Motley Fool article, what's their take on all of this?
They seem cautiously optimistic about Bitcoin's future. They point to the halving event and the potential for increased adoption as factors that could drive growth.
But there's always a but,
Yeah.
right?
Of course, they're also emphasizing the importance of caution. Bitcoin is inherently volatile, and we've seen massive price swings in the past. There's no reason to believe those won't continue.
So they're saying, don't get blinded by the hype, do your research, and be prepared for anything.
Exactly. And I think that's a message worth repeating, especially for anyone new to the world of crypto.
Yeah, I agree.
So
we've established that while historical patterns can give us some clues, they're not a crystal ball when it comes to predicting the future of Bitcoin.
that's right, especially in the world of crypto where things can change at lightning speed.
Which brings us to those potential curveballs, those unprecedented events that could really shake things up for Bitcoin in the coming year.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
the government regulation.
Yes, because governments around the world are still figuring out how to approach Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies.
Exactly. Some countries are welcoming it with open arms, others are taking a more cautious approach, and some are outright hostile.
And to make things even more complicated, the regulatory landscape is constantly shifting.
So depending on how these regulations unfold, it could either pave the way for greater legitimacy and adoption of Bitcoin, or it could throw a major wrench in the works.
That's the big unknown. For instance, imagine if a major economy like the US or China suddenly imposed strict restrictions on Bitcoin trading.
That would definitely send shockwaves through the market.
Absolutely. Or what if they introduced their own central bank digital currency, essentially a government-backed digital currency that directly competed with Bitcoin?
That's an interesting scenario. It would make you wonder if people would stick with the decentralized nature of Bitcoin or flock to a government-backed alternative.
It raises a lot of questions, and the answers could have a profound impact on Bitcoin's future.
So regulation is definitely a wild card, with the potential to both help and hinder Bitcoin's progress.
Absolutely. But let's not forget about the ever-evolving world of technology. Remember, Bitcoin is built on blockchain technology, which is still relatively young and undergoing constant development.
So we could see new innovations that either strengthen Bitcoin's position or challenge its dominance.
Precisely, one area that's been getting a lot of attention is scalability, which essentially means how well the Bitcoin network can handle a large volume of transactions quickly and efficiently.
Because right now, Bitcoin transactions can be pretty slow and expensive compared to traditional payment systems, right?
That's one of the challenges it faces, but if we see breakthroughs in scalability, it could make Bitcoin much more practical for everyday use, like buying coffee or paying bills.
That would definitely make it more appealing to the average person. But couldn't there also be new, more advanced blockchain technologies that emerge and overshadow Bitcoin?
It's a possibility, especially in the fast-paced world of tech where innovation never sleeps. There's always the risk of something new and shiny coming along and stealing the spotlight.
And then there's the whole quantum computing thing, right? I know it's still a ways off, but it sounds like it could potentially pose a threat to Bitcoin.
That's right. Quantum computers are still in their early stages of development. But if they become powerful enough to crack the cryptography that secures Bitcoin, it could undermine its security.
So we've got regulation, we've got technological advancements, both potential opportunities and threats. Anything else we should be keeping an eye on?
Well, we can't ignore the broader economic landscape. Bitcoin is often seen as a hedge against inflation and economic uncertainty, kind of like digital gold.
Right, because its supply is limited and can't be manipulated by governments in the same way traditional currencies can.
Exactly. But what happens if we experience a global recession or a major shift in monetary policy by central banks around the world?
Those events could definitely influence investor sentiment and potentially impact Bitcoin's price, for better or for worse.
It highlights how interconnected everything is. Bitcoin doesn't exist in a vacuum. What happens in the wider world economically and politically can have ripple effects on the crypto market.
It's like trying to predict the weather, but with even more variables at play.
Good analogy. But you see why predicting the future of Bitcoin is such a complex and fascinating endeavor.
So for our listeners who are trying to make sense of all this, what are some key takeaways they should keep in mind?
I think the most important one is this: don't rely solely on historical patterns. They can provide insights, but they're only one piece of the puzzle.
You need to take a holistic view, Consider the potential for unexpected events and recognize all the different factors that can influence Bitcoin's price.
And above all, do your own research. Don't just blindly follow what others are saying, whether it's enthusiastic Bitcoin proponents or skeptical critics. Dig deeper, understand the technology, the economics, and the potential risks and rewards.
Because ultimately, knowledge is power, especially in the world of crypto.
Couldn't agree more. We've covered the halving event, the historical patterns, and those potential curveballs that could impact Bitcoin in 2025. But there's one more piece of the puzzle. We need to explore something that often gets overlooked in these discussions.
Oh, I'm intrigued. What is it?
It has to do with the very essence of Bitcoin, its underlying philosophy, and the reasons why people are drawn to it in the first place.
Okay, now I'm really curious. This sounds like we're about to dive into the heart of what makes Bitcoin tick.
That's a great way to put it. We'll delve into it after a quick break.
Okay, we're back. And you left us hanging with this mysterious essence of Bitcoin that often gets overlooked.
Well, we've talked about all the technical stuff, the market trends, the risks, the rewards. But what we haven't really explored is the philosophy behind Bitcoin, the fundamental ideas that drive its existence.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point because sometimes I'll admit Bitcoin feels like this abstract digital concept.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to grasp on a deeper level.
I get that, but at its core, Bitcoin is about much more than just money or investments. It represents a radical challenge to the traditional financial system
Okay.
as we know it.
So it's not just about making a profit. There's a bigger idea at play here.
Exactly. Think about it. Traditional currencies are controlled by central banks and governments.
Right.
They can print more money whenever they want, which leads to inflation and erodes the value of your savings.
Yeah. I think we're all feeling that pinch these days.
Yeah.
But how is Bitcoin different?
The key difference is that Bitcoin is decentralized. There's no single entity in control. Its supply is limited and predetermined by its code.
Okay.
So there's no risk of arbitrary inflation.
So it's like a safeguard against government manipulation and economic instability.
That's a big part of its appeal for many people. Bitcoin represents freedom, autonomy, and a way to step outside of a system they see as flawed or untrustworthy.
I'm starting to see the bigger picture here.
Yeah.
It's not just about the price of Bitcoin today.
Yeah.
It's about a fundamental shift in how we think about money and power.
That's exactly it. And that's why, despite all the volatility and uncertainty, so many people are passionate about Bitcoin. They genuinely believe in its potential to change the world.
Wow. It's actually pretty inspiring when you put it that way. It makes those daily price fluctuations seem less significant when you consider the larger movement behind it all.
Exactly. And that's the element that often gets lost in the headlines.
Yeah.
To truly understand Bitcoin, you need to grasp its underlying philosophy, its vision for a more decentralized and equitable financial future.
So if we bring this back to the question we started with, is a Bitcoin sell-off on the horizon, or is it headed for even bigger gains?
I think understanding this philosophical dimension adds a whole other layer of complexity. It suggests that Bitcoin is more than just a speculative asset. It's a movement and ideology that resonates with a growing number of people worldwide.
So even if there are short-term dips or corrections in the market, the long-term potential of Bitcoin is tied to something much bigger, something that goes beyond those daily price charts.
I couldn't have said it better myself. The belief in Bitcoin's core principles, this desire for a more decentralized financial system.
Right.
These are factors that could continue to drive demand and adoption regardless of what happens in the market on any given day.
So for our listeners who are trying to wrap their heads around Bitcoin, what's the key takeaway here?
Don't just focus on the price. Take some time to understand Bitcoin's underlying philosophy, its potential to disrupt the current financial system, because ultimately that's the driving force behind this entire phenomenon.
And as always, do your own research, stay informed, and never invest more than you can afford to lose the world. Crypto is constantly evolving. So stay curious, keep learning, and approach it all with a critical but open mind.
Absolutely. The more you understand the fundamentals, the better equipped you'll be to navigate the exciting world of Bitcoin.
And on that note, we've come to the end of our deep dive into Bitcoin. In 2025, we explored the historical patterns, the potential risks and rewards, the regulatory landscape, the ever-changing world of technology, and even the underlying philosophy of this fascinating and sometimes controversial cryptocurrency.
I've really enjoyed this conversation. Hopefully our listeners have gained a more well-rounded understanding of this complex topic.
Me too. Remember, this is just the beginning of your exploration. There's a whole world of information out there waiting to be discovered. So keep asking questions, keep digging deeper, and never stop challenging your assumptions.
In the world of Bitcoin, and really in life in general, a curious and informed mind is your greatest asset.
Well said. Until next time, stay curious and keep diving deep.